Senior Analyst Vrechthel adjusted his optical implants and stared at the holographic display floating before him. The data made no sense. He had reviewed it 17 times already, and each review left him more confused than the last. Around him, the strategic analysis chamber of the collective command hummed with quiet energy. Dozens of other analysts sat at their stations, but none of them were looking at what he was looking at. None of them had been assigned to study the humans. The collective had first encountered humanity 3 cycles ago during the Periphery conflicts. A small human fleet had wandered into contested space near the Draven Nebula. Everyone expected them to be destroyed within hours. The Kreth Dominion had sent 40 warships to intercept them. The humans had only 12 vessels. The mathematics of war were simple and absolute across all known species. Superior numbers meant victory. Superior firepower meant victory. The Kreth had both. The humans won that battle in 11 minutes. Vrechthel pulled up the combat recordings again. He watched as the human ships moved in patterns that seemed random at first. There was no visible coordination. No central command vessel issuing orders. Each ship moved independently, yet somehow they all worked together like fingers on the same hand. The Kreth had maintained perfect formation, following their command protocols exactly as they had been programmed to do. Their admiral had issued orders, and every captain had followed those orders without question. This was the proper way to conduct warfare. This was how civilized species organized their military forces. The humans had torn them apart. Vrechthel saved the recording and opened his communications channel. He needed to speak with someone who had actually interacted with the humans. Someone who had seen their command structure from the inside. Ambassador Creel Vio answered his call within moments. The elderly diplomat appeared on Vrechtel's screen, his facial tendrils drooping with age but his eyes still sharp. "Analyst," Creel Vio said, "I have been expecting your call. You have questions about the humans." "Many questions," Vrechtel admitted. "I have studied their military engagements for the past 30 rotations. I cannot understand how they function. Their command structure appears to be broken, damaged, perhaps even insane." Creel Vio made a sound that might have been laughter. "I thought the same thing when I first visited their military installations. I spent 6 cycles living among them, studying their ways. What I learned changed everything I believed about warfare." Vrechtel leaned forward. "Please, explain. I must understand this before I present my report to the Council." The ambassador's expression grew serious. "Tell me, Analyst, in our military, who makes decisions during combat?" "The fleet commander," Vrechtel answered immediately. "All tactical decisions flow from the highest-ranking officer. This ensures coordination and prevents confusion. Every species we have encountered follows this model. It is the logical approach, and if the fleet commander is killed, or if communications are disrupted, then the next highest-ranking officer assumes command. But typically, our forces would retreat and regroup until a new command structure can be established. Fighting without central coordination would be chaos." Creelver nodded slowly. "This is exactly what I believed. This is what the Kreth believed. This is what the Malvari believed when they challenged the humans at Station Kyrix. Do you know what happened there?" Vrechtel had read the reports. The Malvari destroyed the human flagship in the opening moments of the battle. They expected the human fleet to fall into disorder. Instead, the humans fought even harder. They lost their admiral, but they still won the battle. "I do not understand how this is possible, because you are thinking about command the wrong way," Creel Vio said. "Let me tell you what I learned during my time on their military training world. They call it West Point." The ambassador paused, gathering his thoughts. "The humans have a concept they call mission command. In their military, every leader at every level is trained to understand the overall objective of their mission. They are given authority to make decisions independently to achieve that objective. They do not wait for orders. They do not require permission. They act Rekthal felt his neural pathways struggling to process this information. But that would create chaos. How would anyone coordinate? How would senior officers maintain control? They do not maintain control in the way we understand it. Their senior officers provide intent and objectives. They explain what needs to be accomplished and why. Then they trust their subordinates to find the best way to accomplish those goals. Every soldier, from the highest general to the lowest infantry unit leader, is trained to think independently and make decisions. This was wrong. This went against everything Rekthal had been taught about military organization. He pulled up his data files and showed them to the ambassador. Look at this engagement from the Taris campaign. The human ground forces were separated from their commanding officer. They were cut off from all communication for 18 planetary hours. According to our models, they should have established defensive positions and waited for rescue. Instead, they continued their offensive operations. They captured 3 enemy installations without receiving any orders at all. Yes, Krilvio said, because every one of those soldiers understood their mission. They knew what needed to be accomplished. They did not need someone to tell them what to do. They figured it out themselves. Rekthal spent the next several hours reviewing more data with this new understanding. The patterns began to make sense. In every engagement, human forces displayed remarkable adaptability. When their plans failed, they created new plans. When their leaders fell, new leaders emerged. When communications were jammed, individual units continued operating effectively. They were not following a script. They were not executing pre-programmed responses. They were thinking, adapting, and acting in real time. He compared this to the collective's own military structure. Every officer in the collective was trained to obey orders precisely. Initiative was discouraged. Independent action was punished. The wisdom of the high command was absolute, and questioning orders was considered a form of mental deficiency. This system worked well when everything went according to plan. But when plans failed, when communications were disrupted, when leaders were killed, the entire structure collapsed. Soldiers would freeze, waiting for orders that never came. Fleets would fall into confusion, each captain unsure of what to do without guidance from above. The humans had no such weakness. Rekthal requested access to the archives of human military history. He discovered that this concept of initiative at every level had been developed over thousands of years of warfare. They called it by different names in different eras: Auftragstactic, Mission Command, Decentralized Command. But the core idea remained the same. Trust your people. Train them to think. Give them the authority to act. He found records of a human military leader named Helmuth von Moltke, who had written about this concept long before humanity ever reached the stars. No plan survives first contact with the enemy, this ancient warrior had said. The humans had built their entire military philosophy around this truth. They expected their plans to fail. They expected chaos and confusion. And they trained every single soldier to thrive in that chaos. The council would not want to hear this. Rekthal knew that his report would be rejected. The idea that a decentralized command structure could be superior to their own carefully designed hierarchy would be seen as ridiculous, perhaps even dangerous. But the data did not lie. The humans won battles they should have lost. They adapted faster than any species the collective had ever encountered. Their junior officers made decisions that would require approval from 3 levels of command in the collective military. Their enlisted soldiers displayed problem-solving abilities that the collective only expected from its most senior strategists. He prepared his report anyway. He included every piece of evidence he had gathered. He documented the outcomes of every engagement between humans and hierarchical military forces. He showed how the Kreth, the Malvari, the Centauri, and a dozen other species had all been defeated by human forces that should have been inferior. And he explained why. The humans did not have better technology. They did not have superior numbers. They did not have more resources or better training facilities. What they had was trust. Their commanders trusted their subordinates to make good decisions. Their subordinates trusted that they had the authority to act. This trust was reinforced through training, through experience, and through a cultural belief that every individual mattered. Wreck-Thal added a recommendation to his report. The collective should study human training methods. They should consider implementing limited autonomy at lower command levels. They should experiment with allowing junior officers to make tactical decisions without approval from above. He knew the recommendation would be ignored. The High Command had maintained their structure for 10,000 cycles. They would not change because of one analyst's report about one primitive species. But Wreck-Thal felt compelled to include it anyway, because the data was clear. The future of warfare was not better weapons or larger fleets. The future belonged to species that could adapt, think, and act independently. The future belonged to species like the humans. He submitted his report and leaned back in his chair. Around him, the analysis chamber continued its quiet work. None of his colleagues knew what he had discovered. None of them understood that everything they believed about military organization was wrong. The collective would continue building larger fleets and more powerful weapons. They would continue training their soldiers to obey without question. And when they finally went to war against the humans, they would learn the truth the hard way. Wreck-Thal hoped he would not be alive to see that day, because he had run the simulations. He had calculated the probabilities. A full-scale war between the collective and humanity would not end the way the High Command expected. It would not end with human ships burning in the void. It would end with collective admirals wondering why their perfect formations and precise orders had failed against an enemy that fought like chaos itself. The humans had spent their entire history fighting each other. They had perfected the art of war through countless conflicts, and they had learned the most important lesson of all. The lesson that the collective had never needed to learn because they had never faced a true challenge. Real warfare was not about control. It was not about hierarchy or order or obedience. Real warfare was about people. People who could think, adapt, and act. People who did not wait to be told what to do. People who saw a problem and solved it, regardless of their rank or position. The humans understood this better than any species in the galaxy, and that understanding made them the most dangerous force the collective had ever encountered. Wreck-Thal saved his report and closed his files. The truth was now recorded. What the Council did with that truth was beyond his control. He was just an analyst. His job was to observe, study, and report. The decisions belonged to those above him. He paused, recognizing the irony of that thought. Perhaps that was the problem with the collective. Perhaps that had always been the problem. They expected decisions to come from above. The humans expected decisions to come from everywhere, and that made all the difference.